In this lesson, we will review how to divide a unit fraction by a whole number. What I want you to think about as we do this lesson is similar to the last one, but when you divide a unit fraction by a whole number greater than 1, the quotient is always smaller than the unit fraction being divided. Why is that true? When it says unit fraction, that just means a fraction that has a numerator or a top number of 1. So why is it that when we divide a fraction by a number that's greater than 1, is the answer always smaller? So I want you to think about that as we do these examples. So James grabbed 1/5 pound of grapes from the fridge for he and his sister to share equally. How many pounds of grapes did they each get? Here I need to think about the two things that we have in this problem. We have grapes. And what are we doing with the grapes? We're sharing the grapes equally between who? James and his sister. So that would be 2 people. So think about this. I need to write an equation first, but I always start with what I'm dividing. Am I dividing the grapes or am I dividing the people? We will never ever divide people. So I should always start in this example with the grapes. So I'm going to take 1/5 pound and divide that between 2 people. So here I have an expression to start my work with. So if I start with 1/5, I need to model what 1/5 looks like. So I'm going to draw a big rectangle. And I can't have this showing my 1/5 because this shows 1 whole. So this is not all my work. I have more work to do. I have to show my 1/5. So I'm going to split this into fifths. Okay, so there's 5 parts, but I'm still also not done yet modeling my 1/5 because all I did is show fifths. I have yet to model 1/5. So here, I need to shade in one of these parts. Okay, so now I've shown my 1/5, and that's what I'm starting with. Now I'm going to change my color, and here I'm going to divide that 1/5 into 2 parts. I've already drawn vertical lines, so in order to do this now, I'm not going to add another vertical line because then it would look like 6, and that's not what my problem is asking me to show. So instead, I'm going to draw a horizontal line or a line going across to show 2 equal parts. So I can do that by showing my blue line there. Now I have a top part up here and a bottom part down here. That's 2 equal parts or divided into 2 parts. But here, I still did not answer my question because my question says, how many pounds of grapes did they each get? Well, I don't have an answer yet because I started to draw my blue line to show the 2 parts, but how much is each person going to get? So now I've got to take my color and I've got to show that this is one of those 2 parts up here. Okay, so now where in the world is my answer coming from? When I go to do this, we did this previously. I need to look at where do my 2 colors, my white and my blue, overlap. I see right here there's only one section where the white and the blue overlap. There's white down here, but there's no blue. Over here, there's lots of blue, but no white. So those sections do not count in my answer. The only part that counts in my answer is where both colors overlap. So if I were to put this as part of my answer, I see that there is one part, and that's my numerator, that have both colors. But how many parts are there? So let's count them. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that number becomes my denominator. So my answer is 1/10, and I should label it back to what it asked me for. 1/10 of a pound is what each person would get. If you notice, this answer of 1/10 is less than 1/5. I know it's less than 1/5 because my white up here shows the amount of 1/5, but my answer is only part of that. That's because when I take a fraction and I make it smaller by dividing it into smaller pieces, I get an answer that is smaller than what I started with. Let's look at another example. Cassidy brought 1/2 of a pan of brownies to a sleepover. If the 5 people at the sleepover share the brownies equally, how much will each person get? So now I've got to think about, what are the two things I have in this problem? I have a pan of brownies and I have 5 people. So what am I dividing here? Am I dividing the half a pan of brownies or am I dividing the people? Well, like I said before, we will never divide people. So I cannot start with people. The number you start with is always what you're dividing. So in this case, I'm going to start with the 1/2 because I most certainly can divide a pan of brownies. And I'm going to divide those brownies between 5 people. When you go to write an expression to start with, you always need to think about what is being divided. That will help you decide, should the fraction come first or should the whole number come first? Don't look at the numbers, look at the what do those numbers stand for. So in this problem, we're going to take the half a pan of brownies and divide it between 5 people. So again, I'm going to start by drawing a model. So here's a big rectangle. This is not what I need to do to show my answer or to show my work because I haven't shown what I'm starting with yet. I still have more work to do to show my half. So I'm gonna cut it in half. Whoops. But still, I need to do something else because I have 2 parts, but I haven't shown that numerator of 1 yet. So I need to shade in 1 out of the 2 parts. Okay, there we go. So there's my 1/2. I showed that with a vertical line, so now I'm going to do horizontal lines the other direction to show my 5 people. So you can imagine we would take a knife and we would cut these brownies. So let's do yellow. Now I'm going to show 5 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I have fifths going across and my half going vertically. So now my question says, how much will each person get? Well, each person is not going to get all of this, but each person would get, and I'll go this way, 1 of those slices. So if I were to think about what my answer might be here, how many pieces have both white and yellow on them? I can see here that there's just 1 piece. And in fact, you know what? I should technically make my yellow go all the way this way because 1 person would technically get 1/5 of that. So there we go. So let's go back. I see that there's 1 section right here that is both white and yellow. So my numerator becomes 1. But now how many sections are in this pan total? Well, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that becomes my denominator. How much of the brownies, if they share them equally, how much will each person get? Each person will get 1/10 of the pan. Even though this technically over here was not shaded in, we still have to count that because it's still part of the pan and the brownies were there, but this is only a half a pan. So this is why we still need to take into account what would be over there because it matters for the size of the pieces. We cannot say that this, what we started with, was a whole thing. It wasn't. It was just a half because of this part over here that isn't actually there anymore. So my answer for this problem would be 1/10 of the pan. Okay, last example here. Diego and 4 friends are driving from North Carolina to Texas. They have 1/4 of the trip to go and want to share the remaining driving equally. How much of the trip should each person drive? Okay, so let's start with an equation. Am I going to start with the people, Diego and his friends, or am I going to start with the trip itself? Well, which one could actually be divided? Can we divide people, or can we divide the driving of a trip? Well, we can definitely divide the driving, and we can definitely not ever divide people. So I'm going to start with the 1/4, and I'm going to divide that between what? If you said 4, you missed something because it's Diego and 4 friends. So I would need to divide by 5. So tricky there. So in order to show here, I'm going to start by drawing a rectangle. And I need to split my rectangle into 4 parts. And I have to shade in 1 of the 4 parts. So there's my 1/4. And I'm going to take that 4th and I'm going to divide it into 5 parts. Let's use green this time. I'm going to divide it into 5 parts. And this time my lines are going to go horizontal. 2, 3, 4. Okay, there we go. So there I have 5 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I need to shade in 1 of those to be green. And here's where you want to look for where do your colors overlap. Here I see that I have one section that have both white and green in them. So that's going to help me find my numerator of 1. And my denominator would be how many pieces are there in total. So if I were to count all of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So my denominator would be 20 because there are 20 equal sections there. You could also find that by finding the area. There's 4 there and 5 here, and 5 times 4 gives you 20. So here again, if I were to answer or go back to that question, 1/20th, when I started with 1/4, 1/20th is much, much smaller than 1/4. And I can see that right here in my model. 1/4 is right here, but 1/20th is this little piece. So back to that question, when you divide a unit fraction by a whole number greater than 1, the quotient is always smaller than the unit fraction being divided. Why is that true? Because you're taking something, a fraction, and you're splitting that fraction into even smaller parts. So in this lesson, we have reviewed how to divide a unit fraction by a whole number.